Good morning, dearest friends, holy brothers and sisters. Today is it Zion? Maybe Zion other Shani, Zion other base. Feels like we were just doing Zion other Rishon. And it is Thursday, March 10th. Liman Yonam, and we are studying the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. Presently, Masechet Shabbat, chapter 14, page 107. Page 107.
Yeah,
and
we have background noise.
I know. I hear this guy called their barrel.
Yeah. Also, they're testing the fire alarm in the south building right now. So every few minutes you're going to get
Well, friends, I know there's so much going on, and that makes me even more grateful that everyone is on. To honor and to indulge our very important member of our Chabura, Reb Errol, I'm going to hit mute all, but I want to ask him to unmute so we can hear your wisdom, your thoughts, your questions, and even a can of worms if you want to open a can or two. Reb Errol, you're always invited, but I hit mute all, and again, please unmute. We've been talking about Shmoyna Shiratzim, creepy crawlies, as someone said. Reb Errol, you said that it was creepy crawlies. Shmoyna Shiratzim. There's halachic relevance as it pertains to Shabbos, because continuing our conversation of trapping and wounding, trapping and harming, there may be special considerations or special concerns when it comes to the 8 enumerated shiratzim. First of all, by being specified in the Torah, it perhaps makes them more or most susceptible to being desired for trapping, or maybe that's an indication that they were of chashivas. And also, wounding or harming them, causing a chabura, is also particularly problematic. As you may recall yesterday, we had a variety of possible reasons to be concerned about a chabura. Is it because you're on the way towards, it's a partial, let me say like this, if a person bleeds, blood is seen in the Torah as the life force and where the neshama of an animal and a human being is. And unfortunately, when slaughtering an animal, so that not only is this, in addition to the severing of whatever that brings life, but it's the blood that is expelled that is at least symbolic or representative of this termination or the cessation of life. And when a person causes a wound and draws blood, well, the person is still alive, but they've extracted some of their vitality, some of their life, and they've done something that's along the way to murder. We could debate a lot philosophically if injuring somebody is like 1% murder, because there's reasons why we would not say that. For example, wounds maybe are able to be healed, or the person is still alive, whereas unfortunately taking a life is irrevocable. But in a certain concept, according to some opinions, it is perhaps shchita. I'm sorry, it is perhaps taking life. Alternatively, we said it may have to do with dying. Dying as in, dying, applying pigment. Our Mishnah then says, other shratzim, other creepy crawlies, other kind of animals of this type. Well, a chabura, one is not necessarily chayiv. And trapping is only chayiv if you're trapping it with intention. And yesterday we spent the bulk of our time, and I want to really move past it. We spent the bulk of our discussion comparing a discussion about the laws of Shabbos, where you're not allowed to trap an animal, and we talked about possibly the nature of the hide, and comparing it to the laws of purity and impurity, where animals that are impure, sometimes the hide has the same status as the rest of the animal, and sometimes it has a separate status. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says that the 8 enumerated shiratzim, the 8 enumerated critters, all have leather, which means that their leather, their hide does not become ritually impure. And so the question was, do they have hide? Don't they have hide? What is the significance? And so Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri made another comment about these animals in the context of Shabbos. And then we had Shmuel, who says that our Mishnah only follows the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. There's something special about the hide of these creatures. Rav says actually everybody could agree that there's something special about the hide for the purposes of Shabbos, even if there is a debate in the discussion about purity and impurity. That was the crux of a lengthy discussion. The Gemara is going to probe and discuss back and forth to try to prove and disprove in the Gemara's common manner to either support the viewpoint of Rav or the viewpoint of Shmuel, namely, if there's a consensus behind our Mishnah or if the two debates line up. Respectfully, and maybe you'll be frustrated, I'm going to try to read through it so we'll cover all the words, but I want to kind of breeze through it so we can move on to the next Gemara. Although in theory, we could spend the rest of our day just on this, but I don't think that's what we want to do. And so let's launch into orbit. Oh, it's happening again. Hold on. No. All right. Here we go. Just for your visual convenience, this is the Mishnah we studied yesterday. This is the opinion of Shmuel, stating that only Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who says there's something special about these 8 shratzim, would apply the same law to Shabbos, namely that they have hide, and therefore there are halachically relevant issues. For the purposes of impurity, they do not become impure. For the purposes of Shabbos, you're not allowed to cut them or harm them because you're doing something distinct to this separate leather hide entity. For some reason, it's not letting me scroll in my typical manner here. Here's the Gemara. In Shabbos le'pligi, are you making the claim that there's an absolute consensus about the skin, the hides of animals on Shabbos, the 8 shratzim? Vatanya, there's a brisa that seems to weave the opinions of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri into our Mishnah, into our discussion. Here's the brisa. Hatzad, echad mishmona shratzim amorim b'Torah. If a person traps any of the 8 critters that are mentioned in the Torah in the context of impurity, if you trap them, well, hachoyvel b'hem chayiv. If you cause a wound to any of these animals, you are chayiv. Divrei Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. This is the perspective of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who already famously has the viewpoint that there's something distinct about the skin of these 8 shratzim. And here is a brisa that's going to tell us the Chachamim disagree and say, Ein ar ella l'mashamanu Chachamim. Forget the pasuk. There is only skin to the animals that the Chachamim explicitly point to. Because we quoted from Chulin, we quoted a Mishnah that says that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says all 8 have hide, and the Chachamim say only 4 have hide, and 4, the skin is just like flesh. Again, I'm going to try to go through this fairly fast. The Gemara says, hold on. Adrava. This text doesn't make sense. It should not say, L'mashamanu Chachamim. It should say L'mashamanu Chachamim ein lehem ar. The Chachamim explicitly mentioned 4 critters that they do not have hide. But Rabbi says, you're right. That's really how to understand this brisa. Ein or chalak mibasar, ela l'mashamanu Chachamim. Usually, skin has the same law, the same halacha for purity and impurity as the flesh, as the muscle, and the same thing for Shabbos. Aside for the ones the mashamanu chacham. Amarle Abaya, Amarle Rava challenges and says, "Hal the mashamanu chachamim kamar." That's not what the text says. You're changing the text. And Rava says, "No, you're right. This is how it should be understood. Ein or mitama kibasar elo mashamanu chacham." Although that's not the words, you have to add in some words and understand that we're saying ein or mitama kibasar. Skin does not have the same ritual impurity as flesh, except for the 4 items the Chachamim mentioned that are extremely soft skin, and therefore pardon me for saying this, it's edible, it's soft, it's malleable, it has all of the qualities halachically as flesh, as meat. From here we would infer Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, he's the rabbi who argues and says that all the animals have hide. So is he disagreeing with the Chachamim who say that only the hide that the Chazal mention are impure? The Chachamim here we say the enumerated don't have tumah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says they do. Again, I'm going through this fast. Read as follows. The rabbis say that for the purposes of ritual purity, the enumerated animals that the Chachamim say do not become ritually impure, they are not considered to have hide, because there is a correlation between the thickness of the skin, as we said many times, and the purposes of purity. In Shabbos, are you saying that everybody actually agrees for the purposes of Shabbos that the hide is considered hide? There's a brisa that says this discussion, but in isolation, well, he separates the issues. Again, there's a brisa that says if you trap any of the 8 critters, if you harm them, you're chayiv. And the brisa adds a very confusing line. Shrotzim sheyesh lahem ayros. Only if they have hide. Sorry, period. The Brisa continues. What is a wound that is not that doesn't go away? Nitzar hadam afal pishalayet. We're talking about a bruise where the blood is, so to speak, pooled within the skin. Benuri disagrees and says, so I'm sorry for going fast. Here, there's a brisa wherein we see 2 opinions developing. One opinion that says that all 8 of the Torah listed animals have hide. That's Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. And there's another opinion that says no. Of those 8 that are listed in the Torah, only the ones that have a thicker leather are impure. What's the point of this brisa? Again, moving quite fast here. The point of the brisa is to show that the disagreement that we introduced about ritual impurity is applied as well in the discussion of Shabbos. So, just to recap, Rav tries to sever the 2 debates and says, for the purposes of impurity, there is one set of factors to be considered. For the purposes of Shabbos, there's another set of factors. But this brisa points to a common debate. The Chachamim say not all of the 8 animals actually have hide, and the Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says they do. To deal with this, Rav Ashi, I'm going to just say very briefly, Rav Ashi says actually our Mishnah has 2 perspectives. The opinion that's mentioned that says that we don't look at the 8 that are listed, we look at the actual facts of the hide, is Rabbi Yehuda. I want here, even though I'm going fast, I want just to take note of this specific line. Rabbi Yehuda, the Azil Basar Gishta. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that when looking at an animal and determining if the animal has the animal is impure or not, all that matters, says Rabbi Yehuda, is Gishta, the thickness, the density, and the texture of the skin. He doesn't distinguish. Let's see Rav Stein. He does not distinguish between those animals whose skin is like flesh and those animals whose skin is discrete from flesh, like we usually think. He only bases it on the texture of the skin. So we have now a third factor. Either we just follow the Torah. That's one perspective. Sounds like what Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is saying. A second perspective, which is we actually look at the thickness of the skin. And the third perspective is we're not looking so much at the leather, but something about the design, the style, or maybe the density of the skin. It's non. Yehuda Aimer halata kechuda. Rabbi Yehuda taught us that a lata, which we said is a lizard, has the same halacha as a weasel. Why? Because what they have in common is that there's a distinction. The hide is very much different than the flesh. Let me just give you the bottom line. The bottom line is we were trying to synthesize between two different conversations, one about Shabbos and one about ritual impurity. And we had a variety of challenges to create a perfect alignment between those two issues. And the Gemara responds that we have to just consider that there's actually three different ways to understand the relationship of the hide to the flesh. Do we take it for granted because the Torah said so? Is there something distinct or different about the hide and the flesh, or is it the thickness and the ability to convert it into some kind of material? So that is that Gemara. For those that were zoning out, I want to welcome you back in. And I'm sorry for going fast over here. I wanted to read every word, but I want to move on to the next discussion, which I think we'll find a little more interesting. So again, back to Aleph. We're talking in our Mishnah about a prohibition to injure an animal, to injure or harm an animal on Shabbos. In addition to Dr. Hammer's important comment, we never want to needlessly harm, injure any creature, creation of Hashem. But on Shabbos, even if there would be potentially or hypothetically a license to harm the animal, you're still not allowed to harm it because it's prohibition on Shabbos. What kind of wound is considered a wound that is problematic? So we're going to say, or we said, that it's a chabura she'ena chozeres. It's an irreversible injury. An irreversible injury. And perhaps an injury that is reversible, and we'll discuss what that means. But what I think right now is there's a difference between slapping somebody. What happens if you slap someone or yourself? All right, folks, come back, help me out. What happens if you slap somebody or if you slap yourself? Hopefully, well, you shouldn't do it. But if you did it, most likely what's going to happen is there's going to be a little bit of redness. How long will the redness last? Anyone? Help me out. Alan, help me out.
Depends how hard the slap is.
Okay, so depends how hard the slap is. And you know, you could actually give a black and blue mark with a slap to it. But if
I say years.
No.
Oh, no, you're saying something good.
Not at
You're
all.
saying that the psychological effect could last for years or forever. This is a fair point. But right now we're talking about the skin. So Ellie, you want to revise your comment? How long is the skin injured?
If it's just a regular slap, maybe 3
days.
minutes.
How long?
3 minutes. 5 minutes at the most.
3 minutes, 5 minutes. So it's not permanent. And it's possible that different types of skin are more or less susceptible to having a change in their appearance for a longer or shorter period of time. So not every human being has the same skin. Some people's skin is incredibly delicate. Others is a little more rugged. And similarly, our Mishnah says, or it seems like our Mishnah is indicating that certain animals, perhaps with thin skin, may have a temporary mark, but it is not a permanent mark. It is not a change to the skin itself. It is just a temporary irritation or reaction to being hit. And I'll say, for example, I think human skin, in a sense, is more prone to temporarily preserving evidence of a hit, but over the long term, it'll go away. There are other animals or other creatures which have a much more sturdy, rugged skin, for there to be any evidence of a hit at all, it's going to have to be a whole lot more impactful. But if you get to the point where there is remaining residual evidence of the injury, well, then we're already in bruising territory, and that's got a whole lot more permanence. That's, I believe, a way to understand our Mishnah, and that I believe is the Gemara's sense over here. So again, the Mishnah says 8 animals that are listed in the Torah. If you injure them, you're chayiv. The rest of the animals, if you cause a wound, you're potter. And at this point, the Gemara is going to propose that maybe we're talking about the degree of how much skin is affected. So now the Gemara asks, Levi, who is a famous disciple of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, asked him the following question. Minayin lechabura she'ena chozeres. How do I know that a chabura, for the purposes of our discussion? Rashi. Ulemelach tehahid chozeres lav chaburahu. El, you see this? And where can we understand that an injury that is very, very temporary is not considered a wound at all? For example, those that have skin, the kind of animals that the skin does not preserve in the long term evidence of a wound, or a injury that does not have bruising. So what is bruising? We have medical people. Alan, what is bruising? Hold on, you're muted. You're muted. It's what I mean. I want to hear from Alan, but Rebel, it's breaking capillaries, right?
Collection of blood under.
Why is it a collection? Because you're breaking capillaries, which cause blood to seep to the surface, right? Something like that. And so there's a kind of staining. And so it's interesting that Rashi uses those very words. Shenitzar dam. There's a pooling of blood or a non-pooling of blood. But an injury that doesn't even break the capillaries or whatever else, if I'm getting it, if I'm not being precise over here, the doctors here will have to correct me. But that seems to be the paradigm. And Levi asks, Rebbe, how do I know that a wound, by definition, is a wound that has something of greater permanence? And Eli made an important point, that it's possible, and for our purposes, we're talking about visual evidence, but it's important to remember a person could be not at all wounded, but perpetually scarred on their soul, which is a very important thing to keep in mind.
Rabbi, there's a whole other issue here. Okay. An animal might have thick skin, but if it's a just born or a newborn, it doesn't have that. So you can't just go by the animal itself when it's an adult or whatever you call it.
Fair, very fair.
Also, I don't understand why they're learning all that from dark-skinned person or a leopard.
Doctor, hold on. We're not up to there yet, so you have to.
Oh, okay.
We'll be there in a moment, so stand by. But Levi understands that the definition of chabura is something of greater permanence. Probably, and Rabbi Nachum, help me out over here. Is there a word for a boo-boo that's more minor than a chabura?
Petza? I don't know what the difference between petza and chabura.
Petza, I think, is the skin is broken, right?
Maka, petza, chabura.
Maka, yeah, let's use maka. Maka, which means a hit, is more ambiguous. It also is more describing the thing being done, not the result of the person. But let's use the word. A person can have a maka, they were hit. Then you can have a chabura. I may be wrong, but I believe, and Rabbi Nachum seems to support my understanding, that a chabura is a little more extensive. How extensive? Well, Levi is asking Rabbi, how do we know that a chabura is something that has a degree of permanence? And for those who are wondering what Rabbi Menachem was referencing, take a look now. Dichsiv, here is how you know, says Rabbi. There is a verse in Yirmiyahu that says, Hayahafoch kushi oro vinamer chavar burotav. Do creatures or folks that have distinct skin appearance, can they change? There is permanence. All of us, we cannot choose our skin tone. And again, today this probably wouldn't be very politically correct to say, but in Israel, in ancient Israel, the folks all had a certain degree of pigment, which is probably more than the people living in how do you call it, living up in, I don't know, in Iceland or in Russia or wherever else those, but probably a little lighter than other folks. And so the prophet, hold on.
The meaning of it is simply that people don't change.
People
That's the
can
meaning.
change their skin. And so a Cushite can
Not
change their
necessarily-
skin.
It's an allegory, but
Nachon.
but it just means to show that people do not change. Not
By the way,
necessarily.
the point of this verse is not the content. It's the word chavar barutav. But the verse is saying that just like a leopard and by the way, the idea of a leopard changing his spots, I believe there is such a phrase in the English language, and I believe it is inspired from this verse.
Dr. Hammer could tell you there's books written about that.
So just as much can do good who are practiced in evil. The point is, sometimes a person can become so entrenched in a certain behavior in a certain way, and it's really, really hard to change. Almost as hard to change as a person that has a very distinct pigment of skin or a creature that has spots. Leopards do not know how to remove their spots. Now, today, I know there's maybe different techniques of bleaching or this or that. Leopards do not have such a mechanism for removing spots. That I can tell you with certainty. So how do I know that the word chabura means irrevocable? Well, there's a verse that talks about the inability of a leopard to change its chavar burotav. Now, Dr. Stamler, I don't think in conversational Hebrew, it is very likely that you're going to talk about the namer and its chavar burotav. Am I wrong? I'm picking on the doctor today.
You're not wrong. However,
A poet
is used quite frequently in making a point in literary writings. Not colloquial, but it is a very well-known verse.
Right. So anyways, my chavar barutav. What is chavar barutav? Asked the Gemara. Ilema dekai rikme. If it simply means that it's the spotted rikamim, Dr. Stamler, rikamim in modern Hebrew, is that a word?
Yes, rikma is either the tissue or, but it's also, aside from in a different context, rikma is also when somebody not knitting, but not crocheting, when they use with a needlework.
Micro needling?
Needle, yeah. is a rikma.
Crochet.
Oh, crochet. Okay.
Not crochet,
No.
but needlework.
I got you. So it's like because the needlework by definition is you're creating pixels, dots, spots, right?
Right.
And so here we're saying if it's talking about rikme, so then he says the Gemara, the prophet could use simpler words. Hi v'nomer chavar barutav. Why does it say chavar barutav? Namer givonav miviolate. Should have just said the leopard's colors. Ela kikushi. Rather, what we're trying to talk about is we're describing a certain factor, a certain feature of the spots of a leopard, which are as follows. Ma'ore de kushi in a chozeret, av chabura in a chozer. Just like a person that has darker pigment skin, it's not going to get lighter. Well, similarly, the leopard, so to speak, has these chabura, these bruises, which are irrevocable, which are a permanent part of its appearance. Rashi ela kekushi v'hai namer lashon tumura hayafech kushi oro v'namer chavarotav klomer v'yamir chavurat oro lachzor lekadmuto shelo yitkasher or b'makom hamaka. So similarly, a person also has, or a person that has a wound, we're talking about a wound that has a degree of permanence and not a kind of skin that will immediately be restored. And I think hold on one second. I think we're talking even possibly about a wound that is even more permanent than just bruising. I think this is bordering on scarring. That's what I believe we're talking about over here. Go ahead, Reb. Was it Alan?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We're talking about the leopard skins.
Yeah.
The color isn't in the skin, the color is in the fur.
Okay. We're
No,
using.
I
We're
think
not
the color
using.
is in the skin. I think the color is in the skin. It's pigmentation.
But whether it is or isn't, we're not using skin as an extremely technical term. We're talking about its coat, its covering, skin, fur, or we're not getting highly technical here. We're describing the appearance and the irrevocable nature of the appearance of the leopard. Alan, when you were in the wilderness in Canada, have you ever encountered a leopard?
Not at all.
Okay, Baruch Hashem. If the leopards were to somehow get into Canada, we'd be in trouble. But
They're only in the zoos in Canada.
I know. But anyway, so there we have an interesting pasuk, an interesting diversion. And again, the bottom line, a wound has to be a kind of change in appearance that has greater degree of permanence, like a chabura. A chabura means something that is more permanent. And that concludes a little micro discussion. Now we'll go back to the Mishnah. The Gemara says, Ushar shkatzim or masim, I think, which our Dr. Stalmer brought to our attention. Folks, I should point out we have like another 5-6 minutes left until Zoom cruelly aborts our study session. And so we'll make the most of those next few minutes. And whenever, and I'm not going to pause to alert everyone again, but whenever it stops, we'll pick up there tomorrow. And I want to thank you for bearing with us through the first half. And the next half, I think we'll find a little more
You could
engaging.
go at the speed of the leopard.
Oh, Ushar shkatzim, uramasim. Unlike the 8 enumerated animals, our Mishnah says, other creatures, trap them, unless you really desire them, you're putter. Harm them, putter. Hahargan, chayav. And now we're going on to another topic, the question of killing a creature. So some of you, as you recall, when we were talking about trapping, Alan, I think you asked, what if you're catching a mosquito and all you want to do is catch the mosquito, but you kill it or whatever, is killing permissible? And so now we're going to get into that discussion. Are you allowed to kill another animal? We're not talking about in the weekday. We're not talking about a general question. We're talking about the question of killing these creatures on Shabbos, assuming again that there's a excusable reason for doing so. But we infer from our Mishnah that to kill on Shabbos is not allowed. Ma'antana. We are once again going to probe and search for a specific name of a specific opinion in the Mishnah that is associated with this teaching that says that you're not allowed to kill a critter on Shabbos. Rabbi Yirmiyah says this is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. This is Rabbi Eliezer. How do we see it? And this is going to introduce a number of very interesting discussions. Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer taught an important question. Dr. Hammer, are you on? I think you'll like this. You're not going to like the follow-up and the analysis as much, but let's take a look. A person who kills even a louse or a lice. It's just like killing a camel. Now, if you'll ask a person, which event has more magnitude in your mind? Taking the life of a very, very large mammal or that of a very minuscule, barely visible creature? So generally speaking, human beings will feel more morally comfortable and less impacted by taking the life of something that's very small. Whereas a large animal that you interact with, you ride with, or whatever, might be more difficult to do.
Is the issue of Oneg Shabbos come in here, where if you kill a louse that ruins your the Oneg Shabbos?
Well, at this point, on the contrary, we're saying both are not permitted. Even a small little creature is not permitted, even though you might suppose that it is allowed. So from here, we think we see, Rabbi Eliezer says you're not allowed to kill a creature. I don't care what.
You might have pikuach nefesh.
Okay, we're barring pikuach nefesh. Pikuach nefesh is always going to be the exception. Pikuach nefesh. So if you have those deadly killer hornets on the West Coast coming over from I don't know where, you can kill them on Shabbos if they're truly killer hornets or you think they're killer hornets. That's not a question. Now we're talking about non-killer creatures. Now, by the way, you might be wondering, why do we talk about a camel? So Rashi says, Mishum de gadolhu nakatli. I believe in the time of the Mishnah, camels, and maybe to this day, were probably the largest common animal around Israel. I know maybe there were elephants, but I don't think they were in Israel. Who used elephants effectively in battle?
The Greek.
India.
Right?
Carthaginians.
Right.
Yep.
So what we can infer from here is that this region, the neighborhood of Israel, the neighborhood of the Mishnah, did not have elephants. And so the animal we're talking about here are camels, which were most likely the largest, prevalent, commonly seen critters. Rabbi Elazar says you cannot kill them, and so we say, oh, we found the rabbi in the Mishnah who's anti-killing animals on Shabbos, no matter what, no matter the size, no matter the use. Now, camels, I'm not advocating killing camels, don't get me wrong. But a camel might have a constructive purpose of slaughtering. Unfortunately, or Jews don't eat camels, they're not kosher. But go to Google camel steaks, and there are regions of the world where there are a bounty of camels, and you'll find that there are actually recipes and folks who do consume camel. Again, it's not kosher. It's actually one of the explicitly mentioned as non-kosher animals. So you can't eat a camel, but there's something constructive. So if you have a large group of staff on your camel farm and you want to feed them and they're not Jewish, well, maybe there's something constructive about killing a camel. Bottom line here is you're not allowed to kill any. Maskiv lo Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef challenges Rav Yirmiyah's assertion that our Mishnah is exclusively Rabbi Eliezer. Why? Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim are mostly in agreement that you're not allowed to kill creatures on Shabbos. Why does Rabbi Eliezer stand out? There's a unique debate about lice. And this is one of the very interesting and controversial lines of the Torah of the Talmud. De'ena para ve'raba. Lice do not reproduce in the same way that other creatures do. There's something unique or different about a louse.
Less than a minute. Last minute.
I'm sorry? Doctor, you saying something?